tell me sing a next song for Trinbago. Cause like we ain't learned nothing yet. Oh na na, they say that we are a blessed nation, but like all our struggles people forget. Oh na na, we forget the days of Uriah Butler, when people were struggling just to survive. Oh na na, the days when poverty knew no race or color, and people had real value for their lives. Now today when I look around, all I see is workers protesting from north to south, marching up and down, but they don't know what the real struggle is about. They sing, we shall overcome. You get your wage increase, so you're overjoyed. We shall overcome. Still thousands of youths remain unemployed. Oh, we shall overcome. You protest cause workers don't have safety boots. We shall overcome. Yet HIV still plaguing my nation's youth. Lord, you protest from night to day until you get your raise in pay. But only when we put country first, I say, is only then we shall overcome one day. Whoa, 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 whoa. Ba-na-na, ba-na-na, oh, na-na-na-na, oh. Struggling today, we not seeing clearly. I want to know where we fire and spirit born. Oh, nah, it's no longer about people or about country, the essence out of which this struggle was born. Oh, nah. We used to have a hunger for this struggle. We used to be proud to answer the call. The benefits was for the people of this country, but now I can't see no benefits at all. You see those who have taken more, so the poor stays poor, and that's our mentality. So now it's one nation, but different visions towards the 21st century. Still we shall overcome. The price of fuel, look at gone sky high. We shall overcome. Food in the grocery, poor people can't buy. We shall overcome. Who'll protest for the homeless roaming the streets? We shall overcome. No searching in dustbins for things to eat. Man, you protest from night to day until you get your raise in pay. But only when we put selfishness away, it's only then we shall overcome one day. Whoa, 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 whoa. Ba-na-na, ba-na-na, whoa, na-na-na-na, struggle with pride and struggle for honor, just to make we country a better place. Unity was the force that held us together. We never knew nothing about race, but now I see some people enter the pit, yeah, trying to crush we national pride. They don't want we to mix with pan with tassa. So with weapons of race they seek to divide. Long ago we would march side by side in the hot sun or the pouring rain. Today like the unity and togetherness, all that's gone down the drain, but still we shall overcome. David Rudder's countries can't meet denial. We shall overcome. If education today is still based on hairstyles, we shall overcome. You protest cause they want to take your cola. We shall overcome. We're protesting to bring all races together. Lord, you protest from night to day until you get your raise and pay. When we put divisive thinking away, it's only then we shall overcome one day. Whoa, 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 whoa. Ba-na-na, ba-na-na, oh, na-na-na-na, oh. country, when there was power in the people's voice, the days when we struggled as one family, bounded by circumstance and by choice. You see, this nation could never go forward if we leave some people behind. Together we all must make that step onward. So together the highest hurdle we'll climb. Push from the love of liberty, side by side we stand, should be our battle song. So now is one nation moving with one voice, so that we could overcome, still we shall overcome. A youth pull a gun and take a next youth life, we shall overcome. A husband take a blade and chop up the wife, we shall overcome. You protest for a few dollars in overtime, we shall overcome. Who protesting overtime just to stop crime? Lord, you protest from night to day until you get your raise in pay. But only when we put we bad mind away is only then we shall overcome one day. Whoa, 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 whoa. Banana, banana, oh, na, 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 oh.
Oh yes, only when we put we bad mind away, we shall overcome. One of the younger bards here, Brian London, younger generation, singing there what he calls the workers' song. We shall overcome. We shall overcome. And tonight we are going to be talking about workers' business. We're going to be talking about workers' business. Lineup tonight is a big one. We have attorney at law, senior counselor Roysdale Forde. We have senior veteran trade unionist Lincoln Lewis, and we have the general secretary of the Teachers Union, Coretta McDonald, is going to join us later. Now, once you hear that lineup, you know what we're talking about. We're talking about the teachers' business. As you know, the court handed down its ruling on Friday. And the court said, in short, I'm going to leave all the other seriatums, as we would say, to my guests. In short, what the court said is that the government has no right to deduct money from the salaries of striking teachers, that the strike was a legal strike, and as such, the principle of no work, no pay does not arise. And so therefore the government cannot, should not, must not deduct workers' pay, workers who were on strike, teachers who were on strike. And secondly, the court said that the government refusal to deduct union dues from the teacher's salary was out of order. Bad faith. The judge came down on the side of the teachers. And since the ruling, all hell broke loose. The government is going around the place saying what the judge did is tie the hands of the state, and that workers can go on strike anytime, anyway. In effect, what they're saying, what the judges introduced into our country is anarchy. Whosoever will may come. It's an insult to the judge, insult to the court. And as if the court is not part of the state. They're saying the judge is tying the hands of the state. But the court is part of the state. They're treating the court as though it's not part of the state. A victory for the teachers. The teachers have to say this is a victory for them. It's a victory for trade unionism and collective bargaining. And it's a victory for the rule of law. It's a victory for the rule of law. So this is a big case. It's a big case. and we're going to be talking about it tonight, Monday. I know you guys are just now coming off from the weekend. Trust you had a wonderful weekend, and you're ready for the struggle. Ready for the struggle. Ready for the struggle, because we're up against some tough people. And you know, sometimes when we in Guyana say you're tough, sometimes we mean it in a nice way. But when we talk about these tough people, it's not in a nice way. It's not in a nice way. I am saying that, look, if the government wanted to put up a fight, you put up a fight. The court has now given you a way out. All right. Say, well, you know, we may disagree with the court, but the court has ruled. The court has ruled. Let us move on. Let us call the teachers in and talk, or let us go to arbitration. But no, what they said, we're going to fight the teachers. We're going to continue fighting them. We are appealing. That's what the appeal is about. It's about continuing to fight the teachers. How can you talk about one Guyana when you are fighting the teachers, fighting them to death? How can you look African Guyanese in the face and say to them that you care about them, that you want them in your corner, when you're fighting them for wages? When you're fighting them for wages. How can you look at workers? How can you look at workers and say that you care about workers? You care about their welfare when you're fighting workers. I can understand the state saying, okay, let's bargain. That's what collective bargaining is about. Let me bargain. And the government is going to try to give as little as it can, and the trade unions will try to get as much as they can. But no, the government is saying, we are giving you as little as we think you should get. And we don't care what your union say, we don't care what you say. And if you go to the court and the court rule in your favor, we're going to continue to fight you. That's what we are up against. So all this talk about one Guyana, all this talk about crossover votes, all this talk about the working class, it means nothing to this government. This government is on a rampage, and it is fighting its citizens at every twist and turn. And if our Indo-Guyanese brothers and sisters believe that they're only crushing black people, the minute you put up a fight, they're going to crush you too. That's how dictatorship works. It goes against those it perceives as enemy first, and then it comes to those who it perceive as friends, but who are telling them, man, you're going too far. This government is on a rampage. And this issue of wages is a very important issue. You all know how we've been chucking it on this program over the last couple of weeks. That when you go to the market and you see the high prices, don't quarrel with the market woman. Don't quarrel with the market man. Because what those high prices means is that your wages are low. If your wages were higher, the price wouldn't look so high because you would have been able to afford them. So when you go to the market, it's not the high prices that should be your focus. Your focus should be is the low wages. The low wages. If your wages improve, then those prices will automatically come down. The lady who's selling pumpkin in the market, that's she wage. And if she put on $100, is to make sure she keeping her wage up. And your wage, the price of your labor, is your government, because the government you're working for. So don't quarrel with the high prices in the market. quarrel with the low price for your labor. The low price. So you all know how we doing it on Politics 101. All right? If the government said it's not responsible for high prices, and high prices are created by the market, all right, we give them, all right, good. But you're damn well responsible for the low price of wages. And that's what the teachers are about. The teachers are going to be able to afford the things in the market if their wages go up. So here we are, ready to rumble. Share the link because we got a big program tonight. We got a lawyer, one of the lawyers in the case. We got the TUC General Secretary who joined the case as an interested party. And then we have the teachers rep, Coretta McDonald, who's going to join us later. So we got the lowdown here tonight. We're covering all bases. So we are ready to roll. Tonight, share the link because we're talking workers' business. We are talking teachers' business. We are talking working people's business. You all know how we do it here. We turn the mantra on its feet. You see, the mantra is on its head right now. You know what we just say? Black people suffering bad, but Indian people suffering too. Well, we said that story, stand up on the head. We turn it up and put it on the foot. Here are we doing it here. Workers and poor people of all races are suffering. Workers and poor people of all races in Guyana are suffering. But African people, because of their own history and because of where they are located in the economy, they're not in the private sector where they determine their own wage. They're not working mostly for private businesses where the businesses determine their wage. They're working for the government and the state. And the government and the state determine their wages. And there is a government and a state that is fighting them ding dong. You see, the government top up the sugar workers with $250,000. And then when Gawu said, they top them up a little bit more. But when it comes to public servants, no $250,000 top up. And when the PSU and the GTU cry, instead of topping the workers up, they kick them down. Tell them David Hines said that. And I want that narrative that I put in out there and that I've been putting out there. And that's the narrative I want you all to tell your political leaders. That's how they must talk. Don't come to you and tell you, well, black people suffering, but all other people suffering. No, they get the story wrong. Workers of all races are suffering. But black people, because of where they are located, this suffering is a particular type of suffering. You see, if you're working for the man on Regent Street in his store there, and he give you low wages, he beating you. But when you're working for the government, it's your government beating you, your government, with the heavy hand of the state that is busting your tail. And that is the condition of African Guyanese. That is where the African Guyanese worker condition, while it has similarities with other workers, it has its own peculiarity. That's the narrative. And that's what we're going down with. That's what we're going down the road with. Teachers, welcome tonight. You all have a smile on your face. But if they don't want to go to arbitration, or they don't want to call you all in to talk, ready, steady, go. But we're going to talk about that later on. Let me bring in my guests. They're waiting patiently. Attorney at Law, Senior Counsel, Roysdale Forde.
Good night, Dr. Hines. Good night, Dr. Hines. Good night, Lincoln. Good night to the audience.
Good night, my friend and comrade, and well, you all know Lincoln get me in trouble plenty time. Lincoln get, but I won't talk about that tonight.
Well, you look like you want to get me in trouble tonight. Good night. Good night.
I have a lawyer.
I'm seeing you too often today.
If you get me in trouble,
it may be a good thing.
I get a lawyer tonight who will represent me. Brothers, welcome to Politics 101. It's a good time to be alive because we are in the presence of history making. Brother Roysdale, I want to start with you because this case, from my standpoint as a political activist and political science scholar, I see this case as defining. The government has a simplistic response to the case. That's my term, simplistic, because it's saying that the judge's ruling opens the door for workers to strike. Whosoever will may come. Any day workers wake up one day, they decide to strike, they're going to strike with no reason. So they're accusing the judge of introducing anarchy into Guyana. I want you to respond to that, but also to put this case in its larger legal and constitutional context.
Thank you, Dr. Hines. To do so, I'll have to start probably in the same manner that I did during my presentation in court, which was to position this case in the context of the Constitution and the Constitution in the time in which we live. In 1980, we had a constitution that was brought in. The 1980 constitution, we're all aware of it. And a few years later, in the Muhammad Ali case, the Court of Appeal was called upon to determine whether Guyana had collective bargaining. And the court ruled in that case that Guyana did not have a constitutional right to collective bargaining. And in so arriving at that conclusion, our Court of Appeal, by Mr. Messiah, who was then the Chancellor, adopted the position of the Privy Council in the Trinidadian case of Collymore, a well-known case throughout the British Commonwealth. But what would have happened over the years, if we were supposed to jump to 2024, between 1987 or 88, when Justice Messiah delivered that decision, and what would have happened by 2002, and then by 2020 or 2024, is that we had a fundamental realignment in what constitutes the Constitution and its elements. Having gone through a process of constitutional reform, Parliament passed certain legislation, certain amendments to Article 147 of the Constitution, which made it radically different in its scope and its import. But until this case, we never had a judicial determination or explanation as to the range and proportion and limit of those rights, which would have now been brought into the Constitution for the first time. So by 2002 or 2003, we had in the Constitution new provisions, new articles in 147. 147.2 provided for the freedom to strike, and the third provision, the new third provision, 147.3, provided for a right to collective bargaining. So these provisions did not exist at the time when the previous cases would have been determined. And I argued before the court that we were in a different constitutional architecture, that the old cases were done away with by virtue of the legislation. And the other critical element upon which this case and this decision and this historic landmark decision is rested on is other constitutional amendments which would have been made around the same period. We would have instituted provisions in the Constitution, providing by way of Article 39, Article 39.2, for the court to rely on international conventions. And specifically, we provided that in Article 154A, a series of international conventions actually became part of the constitutional law. So we moved from a sort of dualist society, international law plus common law or statutory law, and we merged into a sort of unilateral unity sort position in which we merged the international law, the international conventions, and sought to domesticate it into the constitutional law and the ordinary law of Guyana. So when these issues came before the court, these were obviously issues which should be determined for the first time, having regard to these new provisions that existed in law for the first time, as I said. The argument of the government that this somehow opens the floodgates to any strike or any madness that any labor union will want to employ was completely rebuffed by way of arguments that myself and Mr. Wade presented to the court. You know, we sought to position the case in the context of social justice. And in my submissions, for example, I paid attention to the preamble of our Constitution, which required that the court consider that we must be governed under a system of broad-based participation, democratic values, and social justice. So one of the questions that I kept asking the court repeatedly throughout the presentation, my presentation, is what is to happen in a situation where, as in this case, the government rejected collective bargaining, refused to engage in collective bargaining, and the workers' response is to go on strike. The workers' response is to go on strike, Dr. Hines, in the face of a rejection of collective bargaining. Is that, and then you seek to impose upon them, in those circumstances, an automatic sort of penalty, which is to take away their salaries for the days on which they would have gone on strike. So it is that sort of balance that I presented to the court. And I urge the court to adopt what would have been the rational social justice position, which would be allow the unions and the workers to stand up in defense of their right to collective bargaining and to balance it against all the circumstances of the case. Was the government fair in its rejection of the union's contentions at the collective bargaining process? Was there collective bargaining? Was there negotiations? What is the length of time that would have expired during which these issues would have remained unresolved? And more importantly, Dr. Hines, what would have been the role of the dispute resolution mechanisms to prevent the strike? Because we accepted that the strike is a mechanism of last resort. It is an action of last resort. It is a weapon of labor as a matter of last resort. So we presented these situations for the court to engage in a sort of balance. And in guiding the court, from our point of view, we relied on a number of Indian cases which recognize the need for this social balance, the need to prevent the very thing that the government is trying to accuse the court of, anarchy. Because if you suppress people continuously without allowing them to be able to articulate and defend their rights, and then when you seek to do so, as provided for by law, you then impose penalties on them, that is what would lead to anarchy. So the Indian courts sought to balance this situation. And they defined a principle called, which they said that the court must look to see in each industrial situation whether the strike is legal and justified. And that would allow the court to make an assessment having regard to all the circumstances of each particular case. So this is not a broad-based sort of opening the road to any wagon which wants to run down. As the court pointed out in this particular case, there was careful examination of the circumstances which led to the strike. We were able to cross-examine the chief education officer. The court concluded that his evidence was thoroughly unreliable, that the evidence was meant to deceive the court. The court analyzed the circumstances and concluded that the documentation really and truly showed and demonstrated and evidenced a rejection of collective bargaining. We were able to point out numerous instances of unilateral conduct and imposition of wages and other terms and conditions which ought to have been resolved by way of collective bargaining and in fact formed part of the proposal submitted for the period 2019-2023. I believe that the court was particularly disturbed by the evidence that came out from cross-examination, where the chief education officer basically told the court that he saw nothing wrong with a failure to complete effective and effectual collective bargaining, even though the period would have expired. So from 2019 to 2023, that is the period for which the proposal was made. And he's saying that somehow we could go on ad infinitum. The ad infinitum issues became very critical, I believe, in the resolution of the matter, because when the chief education officer was on the cross-examination by me, I was able to elicit some very important pieces of information. One is that at the date when they were participating in the mediation process, and they had signed certain documents agreeing that they were going to go back to the collective bargaining table to engage in a discussion in relation to wages and collective bargaining as a whole, the government itself had determined by that time that they were no longer interested in any collective bargaining arrangement with the union for the period 2019-2023, inclusive of wage increases, as was proposed. So that came out in the evidence, and I believe it demonstrated at a high degree of bad faith. I believe when the judge analyzed Section 23 of the Trade Union Recognition Act and the obligation of an employer to act in good faith and to treat and regard the union, the court concluded that they have a regard to all the evidence. The court concluded that the government had engaged in a sustained and continuous, unprovoked sort of a situation in which they engaged in a course of conduct which sidelined and sought to undermine the union. I believe those, set up the general landscape of why the court came to its conclusion. So I reject out of hand the proposition, which is totally silly. It's disrespectful to the court, to the intellect and the erudition displayed in the judgment, to think that the court will just simply deliver a decision that will be such open-ended that will cause instability in the society. The court demonstrated a degree of maturity, Dr. Hines, which we have not seen recently in many cases like this. The court, long before it proceeded to a decision, sought to have the parties themselves sit and resolve these issues. And the court was able to then examine what happened and able to see that when they were purporting to act in good faith, they were in fact not acting in good faith. They had decided they were never going to enter into any collective bargaining. And in fact, what the court posed as a question during his judgment, what is there to stop the government from saying that for the new period 2024 onward, we're not interested again in dealing with these issues? The court went on to deal with the issue of whether it was fit and proper for the government to refuse to engage in the deduction of dues and the remission to the union. The court felt that this was attacking the very lifeline, the lifeblood of the union, the ability to have resources to engage in the defense of its workers and its representatives. The court therefore found that this was all acts of bad faith and all totally in breach of Article 147 of the Constitution. I could go on and on, Dr. Hines, because this is a signal case. It is a landmark case. I believe that we have been able to, due to our dedication to our people, we've been able to go Darren Wade, I'm speaking in the plural, we've been able to articulate a position which the court has accepted. I believe it has radically realigned the context of which we operate politically in Guyana. I don't believe that our Guyanese people really have allowed this to seep in sufficiently into their marrows and sinews. I believe that they should be walking with an extra pep in the step. They should be walking with a degree of confidence now, having regard to the circumstances in which we live. I was very concerned and happy to hear your opening comments that you made, Dr. Hines, because it goes to what is really at stake here. The government sees everything from a political lens and from an ethnic lens. I believe they have managed to create the sort of spectacles through which they will see through both eyes, both things at the same time. And your views that you articulated in relation to workers workers' rights, ethnic groups that predominate certain professions. We see it. We don't have to say or run away from it. We see it in relation to public servants. We saw throughout the case the alarm that the government demonstrated in saying that this is not about teachers alone. Um, my good friend Lincoln will deal with those industrial issues. But we saw this degree of concern that this is not about teachers alone. And they actually told the court that. My good friend Ramdani, QC, Casey probably now, Casey told the court on one day that this decision that he's likely to deliver will hamstring the government's ability to govern the country. These were the sort of propositions which displayed and emanated from the minds of the legal representatives of the government. So we had a situation here, Dr. Hines, where I believe that what the government was seeing was race and ethnicity. The fact that you could engage in unilateral impositions of wage and salaries and then expect persons to accept it speaks of subjugation. These are principles which we have rejected by the constitutional framework of social justice. We can't have persons working for wages that will keep them in poverty. Um, the point that you made, Dr. Hines, is critical. Predominantly, the African Guyanese people are public servants whose wages are determined by government. The government in this country, I believe, is a racist government, and therefore they operate primarily judging people on the basis of race. You do not see, Dr. Hines, this sort of disrespect and contempt demonstrated in relation to the sugar workers. I had to point out a few nights ago that really and truly, when Mr. Nandalal, the Attorney General, stood up in court and he spoke about understanding the sugar industry and understanding where he came from and appreciating the conditions of East Indian persons who goes into the fields, he made a very important point, which has captivated me. He said that the only way in which you could get wages whilst you were on strike is when you enter into a resumption agreement with the government or the Gaisuko. And the judge asked me the same question. And I told the judge that in my view, labor, which I'll have to give Brother Lincoln some licks tonight, over a period of time, accepted these principles which are inconsistent with our understanding and the extent of the rights that we have. You don't have to, once your strike is legitimate, is justified, and you go on strike in defense of your rights, you don't need no resumption agreement to be able to get your wages. This is not slavery, is not indentured servants being called to work. This is a radically different environment. This is the sort of environment that the founders of our Constitution, the PPP, cursed them from time immemorial. This is the Constitution of the country, and this is the sort of rights which have been enshrined. These are rights meant to release people and empower them from bondage. And imagine in 2024, you want to argue before a court of law that people must be able to stay wedded to wages, don't complain about it. If they complain, they must engage in another punishment and penalty of not to be paid their wages. We have, by these provisions, Dr. Hines, made a radical break from the sources of the common law, which the Attorney General relied on. Those sort of feudal relations no longer exist by virtue of the enactment of these provisions and the declaration by the court. I'll stop. I seem like I'm taking up your interview.
No.
Oh.
Your thing. Let me bring in Lincoln, and I see Coretta is joining us, so she is coming right on time. Lincoln, I go to you next because you have lived through more than 60 years of trade unionism as an active trade unionist. And so you're able to bring to bear that panoramic view. Tell us what this case has done for trade unionism, for workers' rights, and for, in particular, collective bargaining and the right to strike, the right to strike. Tell us how important this case is within the context of those variables that I pointed out there.
Let me thank you for inviting me. Let me just start from where a statement made by Roysdale. I believe it's important that that statement be addressed. I cannot agree with him more. We have to take some beating on this issue as trade union leaders. You know, there is a view, while we may have the Constitution and laws in this country, that employers can do anything, violate the laws, throw the Constitution aside, refuse to talk with the trade union, and you go on strike, and they tell you that we have to have resumption, and then we discuss the issue. Even with the teacher strike, my note I can show you. My note says, let us have discussion for a number of days. And if we don't agree on that, we move to arbitration. Because there is no law which says that you must have resumption before we can deal with the issue. I'm going to tell you, I come from the bauxite industry. I know of a number of issues where there were strikes, and those issues were resolved before you return to work. Okay? There may have been some custom and practice in some years ago, but now what we have is the law to guide us and protect us. And I believe that the question you've asked, say to us that this decision here will force employers to come to the bargaining table. Because I'll tell you what, this decision simply prompts me for us that if the employer refuses to negotiate bilaterally with the union can apply for concession. And if the chief labor officer refuses to conciliate in the matter, right, based on the grievance procedure, and the union can apply for arbitration. And if he refuses to facilitate the process of putting in place the mechanism to put an arbitration tribunal in place for, and the workers strike and the union call us them, then in fact they will have to pay the workers. You don't mean that a worker can get up tomorrow morning and the union just say, well, we are not going to deal with the grievance procedure, but we're going to call a strike. That is what it means for. And let me tell you, this strengthens the hands of the trade union. This decision here puts the PSU, the Guyana Public Service Union, in the driver's seat, where they've been asking for negotiating a new collective labor agreement since the expiration of the agreement that has been put in place by the tribunal that was headed by Abraham Frank, right? We have not had an agreement since then. Now, if the government refuses, they are in the driver's seat to call the public servants out if they don't want to talk. We have to. So this here is forcing employers or holding employers accountable based on 23(1) of the trade union recognition law, which speaks about so long there's a certificate of recognition, the employer will have to negotiate with the trade union in good faith. So this is a major blow for the government that has imposed wages and wages and salaries on public sector workers over a number of years. So it comes now that since we are on this big program, I see Coretta coming in, and we have the lawyer here, right? The lawyer will have to really advise us at some point. If we can go back to court now to deal with the issues where they have been imposing wages and salary all the time, we have to do something about it. Because this government is prepared to use the law, not the code, use their authority or their privilege as an executive to continue to impose things on workers in this country.
Brother
I want to say to you that the trade union has to go down there. The trade unions have a responsibility now to go to the workplaces and talk with the workers, bring them up to date with what taking place.
With what's taking place.
This strengthens our hand. This set a platform for the re-emergence of the militancy in the workers' movement. And it comes at the right time, a time when you have employers that are coming from all parts of the world, coming into this country, telling people to leave their jobs, do an interview or see a man and say, I can take you on. And the man come on today, and next month they say they don't want you and they send him home, right? These things are happening at the right time. A re-emergence of the militancy of the trade union.
Re-emergency of the militancy of the trade union. General Secretary of the Trade Union Congress, Lincoln Lewis, we heard before him, Roysdale Forde, senior counsel, who argued the case along with Darren Wade on behalf of the teachers. Of course, Mr. Forde joined the case on behalf of the TUC, which joined as an interested party. We have Coretta McDonald, the General Secretary of the Guyana Teachers Union. She, of course, needs no introduction. Coretta, I want you to tell us how this case, how important the ruling here by the judge, how important it is for the GTU and for the present cause of the GTU in its fight for better wages. And I want you to, as you give your answer, to fold in to your answer the notion that some of your supporters, including some teachers, I imagine, who felt that when the court ordered mediation, that you all should not have closed the strike temporarily, that you all should have remained. I want you to fold into your answer whether this ruling of the court vindicates that tactical move by the GTU to call the strike off temporarily while the court ordered mediation was given time to play itself out. Because in my view, what that did was it allowed the government to show its hand, which then played against them in the court of law. But I want to put word in your mouth. How does this affect the GTU, this ruling? And do you feel vindicated by that tactical move to temporarily halt the strike a couple of weeks ago?
Well, good night to you, David, and good night to my colleagues here, Roysdale Forde, SC, and Lincoln Secretary GTUC. First of all, I want to thank you for being on the program. And am I getting a feedback somewhere?
Yes, but it's not bad. It's not bad. You go ahead.
All right. I think it's better now.
Yes, it's better now.
And you know why this is happening is because I'm driving and I'm driving,
I
and so I'm
realize
using
that.
the Bluetooth in the car. All right,
Yes.
but let me say very quickly what the decision of Judge Kissoon has done to our teachers. It has now emboldened our teachers. This here is a massive win, not only for our teachers, but for all of Guyana, workers especially. This move by the GTU has caused us to recognize that one, in unity, there is strength. And secondly, when you know what you're about, you can win battles. You see, when we were going through all of this from 2020 to 2024, which the judge highlighted, persons were there and they were saying that you shouldn't do this, you should do that, you should do all sorts of advices we got. But the fact here is we went through the process. We used every step of the collective bargaining process until we got to where we reached. And that is to have industrial action. I hear Lincoln talk about the process of conciliation and arbitration. We went all of there. More than that, this win is saying to us, if the labor movement were to unite, we were going to win many more battles. And the respect for workers across this country would be at a higher level. And I'm saying that to say this. Many of us champion the cause that we are union leaders. But when it comes to the time for standing at the starting line for the race, we become spineless. And many of us, rather than getting into first, second, and third gear, we continue to stand at the starting line and we issue a whole lot of rhetoric, which doesn't do anything for this movement. The other thing that this has brought out for all of us as union leaders is that it has taught us a lesson that we should at all times have documentation for what we do. We must document everything that we do. But let me say to you that the GTU pulling off when the judge decided that he wanted to intercede, many of our teachers said it was a wrong move and they were disappointed. Many parents and onlookers, they said, oh, the GTU is playing in.
I think we've lost Coretta's song there. Okay.
And a whole lot of things they said to us. But we were guided not only by the books, but we were guided by our seasoned trade unionists, some of our senior seasoned trade unionists, like Lincoln Lewis. While we understood that we could have been talking while we were on the streets, the mere fact that we pulled our teachers off displayed that we were ready to be in our classrooms. But it was the government who was causing us to be on the streets. It was never our intention to be on the streets. And so that played out well for us. Additionally, this case has shown the world that this government, they're not credible. That is what it has shown the world. It has shown the world that they are anti-working class. And more than that, it has also shown the world that even while the law is prevailing, they still want to fight the law. because you've already heard the Attorney General saying that they're going to appeal this. Now, these are your workers. You prefer to stifle your born and bona fide Guyanese workers, but to bring foreigners in and pay them even more. It is ridiculous. And I'm hoping that
Sister Coretta seemed to have lost some of the audio there.
would stand as the flagship for all the other unions who are having issues with this government when it comes to collective bargaining. But I must add that case has given to our teachers new life, which will bring all of them out on the streets. If we were to call an industrial action tomorrow morning, because the judge has ruled that teachers must not lose any salary, and that the reluctance of the government to continue deducting the dues from the teachers' salaries, it must continue. And the judge went as far to say, and I want to quote him, he said, the teachers united and raised their voices, asking you for bread. What did you do? You gave them stones. And I think that is the high point, or was one of the high points of the case, where it's showing that teachers are professionals. We want for our students or our learners, but it is the government who's not only wicked to teachers, but they're wicked to the citizens of this country who are parents, and they're wicked to the children of this country. So while they preach that one Guyana, it's not any one Guyana. It's about one elite group. Because you recognize too that when we were having this, those who are the elites, their children were attending schools because they were at private schools, and so they were attending schools, while the ordinary man's child was at home because they could not. And so several issues have been highlighted coming out. But I want to thank especially our attorneys. They were very, very thorough with what they did. We want to thank the Guyana Trades Union Congress, the president and team of the Guyana Trades Union Congress, because they did for us what we couldn't do by ourselves. The moral support we got from them, the moral support we got from the Caribbean Union of Teachers, Education International, and so many other unions, including the GPSU, it only served as strength for us to go forward.
Serve as strength for us to go forward. There you're hearing from Coretta McDonald, excuse me, the General Secretary of the Guyana Teachers Union. We're talking about that ruling on Friday by Justice Kisoon, which is hailed by those who are sane and sensible as a landmark ruling. I go back to one of the attorneys, Roysdale Forde. Roysdale, one of the issues we have been having in Guyana is the question of the rule of law. The rule of law and the way in which the democratic aspirations of our country have been dealt severe blows, especially over the last 4 years. How does this case seem to position us to attack even stronger that imposition and that violation of the rule of law by our executive government.
Thank you, Dr. Hines. I believe that this is a very key part of the new weaponry of the Guyanese people going forward. Um, Almost every Guyanese person who's employed sort of have some relationship with the union. Either is a member of a union or their workplace has a union, but they may not be a member of the union. And the whole scheme of things, what we would have seen happening over the years, when we look to see what would be the government response, Jagdio's response, let's call his name, Jagdio's response to the Guyana Public Service Union after the Armstrong Commission, we saw a galloping dictatorship. We saw a galloping government seeking to demolish and render nugatory the impact of trade unionism in the country. And that is why I said to Lincoln, we would speak about it, that you got to get some licks. Because what we saw happening over the years is an aggressive nature being implemented and manifested by this government continuously against labor. But when you think about it, Dr. Hines, in the context of our political situation and our political dynamics, the trade unions play a central role in defending the rights of workers. Now, as we go forward, the government sees everything from the point of view, and they want it simply to be a situation as either the PPP or the PNC. But the Constitution and any normal functioning society that is a democracy has a place for labor. If you go through our Constitution, repeatedly you would see reference to trade unionism, the involvement of trade union, broad-based participation. So we have enough in our Constitution, and by virtue of this decision, which will continue to give confidence to the workers and I believe to trade unionism in the country. One of the things that I've been doing over the last couple of days, Dr. Hines, is trying to, I'm no economist, but I understand economic issues. And one of the things that I've been trying to do over the years, and particularly since this judgment would have been delivered by the court, is to sort of calculate what is the economic loss that would have occasioned public servants and predominantly African Guyanese by virtue of the continuous imposition of wages. When we see what has been happening in relation to the Public Service Union and their workers, and what they attempted to do now in relation to the Guyana Teachers Union, when we see what would be the conditions under which African Guyanese live, the conditions under which soldiers live, firemen live, teachers, nurses live, you would see that they are being deprived of billions of dollars. Billions of dollars. And that is where I want to position this case, Dr. Hines, in terms not just simply of the austere, bland legal principles which I started off commenting on, because I had to do that to provide the dynamics. But life and law go together. It's a product of a society. And when we calculate what would have been the losses to African Guyanese people, the losses to Indian Guyanese people, Amerindian Guyanese people, all Guyanese people who are public servants, by virtue of the racist, the predominant racist anti-worker philosophy of the government, it would have been billions of dollars which would have been deprived from these groups of people. We know largely that public servants are predominantly African Guyanese. So from that community, from that ethnic group, millions and billions of dollars would have been impacted and taken away from them by this sort of policy. The same thing for the Indian communities, the same thing for the Amerindian and the other ethnic groups who fall within the category of public servants. And what this really means, Dr. Hines, and this is where, I've been accused over the last 4 years when I became a member of parliament of filing cases and the population not really understanding the impact of it. The cases that we would have filed are significant cases. The cases we would have won are significant cases. But I believe this is the most significant case in terms of measuring the impact on people, on their families. There are thousands of children who are children of public servants who don't have proper meals, who can't receive proper textbooks, who can't receive the sort of nutrition that they need, who are parents, their parents, and they feel that they're incapable of providing the basic needs for their families. These are important and serious issues. They are not political issues ordinarily that is supposed to be carried only by the political party of which I'm a member in the opposition, but these are national issues. And I believe this case points out clearly the importance of a resurgent and dynamic labor movement. I believe that they have been given a fresh start. They've been given the start that has been considered and laid down in the Constitution. It has now been made manifest. And my greatest wish going forward is that this case realigns the dynamics in this country. I am a politician, of course, so I know that someday this case will back up a government that I'm a part of, and I'm proud to be part of this case going forward, that it will back up future governments. Rights are only defended, Dr. Hines, when you stand up, when you go to court and defend them. If the teachers union was made of weak stuff, if the trade union congress would have made of weak stuff, the government would have prevailed, the dictatorship train would have been running down its track at high gear, and the people would have lost hope, continue to lose hope, continue to live in a quagmire of poverty and hopelessness.
We are listening here, of course, to our panel tonight, analyzing the recent ruling by the court on the teachers' right to strike, and in a resounding victory for the teachers, the court came down on the side of human rights, on the side of workers' rights, on the side of the rule of law. And the team tonight is best positioned to really talk to this issue. We have Mr. Roysdale Forde, of course, was one of the lawyers. The General Secretary of the TUC, one of the umbrella organizations, labor organizations, and the TUC itself joined the case as an interested party. And of course, the General Secretary of the union that as in a sense, taking the lead, the vanguard in, if Brother Lincoln talk about the resurgence of trade unionism and trade union militancy. And the court ruling is important, but I would go further and say it was the action by the GTU and the teachers. When history is written, it is the action by the GTU and the teachers that would have ignited the resurgence of trade union militancy in this country. Oh, how we yearn for that. Workers continue to be important. And at a time when we are moving into the status of a petro state, at a time when people, employers from all over the world are flocking to our country, workers' rights are more and more important. Perhaps in other parts of the world, they can talk about the trade union dying. In Guyana, the trade union better come to life again because we're entering into a new era. Lincoln and Coretta, I want you all to address this issue because I'm linking wages to cost of living. And Coretta was not on, but Lincoln, you heard my thesis, which is when our workers go to the market and the prices are high there, don't vex with the lady that's selling the pumpkin or the balangey. Vex with the government that is keeping your price of labor low. So the high prices in the market is really a reflection of the low price of labor. That if you raise the price of labor, if you raise the monetary value of labor, those prices will look low. And that's the thesis that I've been working with here. Lincoln and Coretta, I want you all to speak to that issue, the linkage between wages and the cost of living, so that instead of quarreling with the rise of price in the market, because the lady who's selling she pumpkin got lift too, that she wage. When she raised the pumpkin, a slice of pumpkin by a $50, that she wage. But we who working for the government and going in is the government holding back our wages. I want you all to comment on that, because I think that is so important in putting the teachers' action in context, Lincoln, and the resetting of the trade union militancy has to come with a narrative that the ordinary worker understands. Lincoln Lewis, and then Coretta McDonald.
You have already explained this, but let me take it from this direction. You know, in the trade union, you say, when we are at the table, we argue for increasing pay. And when the employer don't budge, we say, if you pay peanut, you will get monkeys. In our specific case here, if you continue to have low wages, we will continue to have the people, or the bulk of the people, operating at subsistence level. And those farmers who will have to pay an increase for, be it pesticide, be it for labor that they recruit at the farm, they will have to increase the product. So if the product used to be $100, and they increase wages and other things, put other things into it, the product will definitely need to $150. When you're going to put it at $150 for produce, and you may have to make what you call something to keep to contribute to things like farm to market costs and those type of things. Those things will carry up the prices. But if you don't get a wage increase from the government, you're not going to be able, if you used to buy two pound a bora, you will have to cut it down to maybe 1 pound or 1.5 pounds. So we have to, let me say it to you, to the viewership, people need to understand that government or the state set the trend when it comes to wages and salaries. But what has happened in our country is that when Jack Dio goes out, or they're talking to people, he and Ali's the front man now, who running outside there, and talking to investors and saying, come, one of the things they say to them, you will have cheap labor. They sell the country on the premise that there is cheap labor. So what they do is that they hold it at a certain level. I'm ashamed, you know, when people call me and they say, to tell them that the official minimum wage is $300 a month. That's where we are. That's what we're saying. So people are going to, we have to start now and increase the message, right, to the people. And people have to come on board to not only understand it, but you have to come on board to understand and do things. We have to join hands in this process. We can't just sit down and say, look here, we hear you, but what is the union going to do? The strength of the union is in the membership. I always say that a union is led from behind, but is guided from in front. What I mean is that it is the desires of the membership that drive the executives in the union. And if you sit down and you do nothing, then the executive will not be successful. I always remember, I just make this example to them. There was a man by the name of Roy Drakes, Justice Bobby Drakes' father, who was president for the union at Linden. He went to Mowbray, who was the Denver personnel manager, and talking to Mowbray about conditions. And he said, we. And here Mowbray said, Mowbray said to him, who we? He said, don't worry, who we. You're going to see who we just now. And within half an hour, he tell Mowbray, he said, look at the Washapan room. Go and look there. The people were walking up, the workers walk out the back like that and walking up there. That is the type of militancy that we want to see. That's why we must return. Don't tell me what is the government. Let me tell you something. We have to stop this thing. We have to stop the government from violating the laws and transgressing our rights. We have to stop them. We have to take every opportunity. You know, let me tell you what this is. Let me tell you about this quote. I was there every day when they argued this. And when we came out from the court, Roysdale Forde asked me what I think. And I said to Roysdale Forde, we're going to win this case. And he keep asking me every day what my thoughts are. Even to the morning, I said to him that this decision will come in our favor. I was so confident I was buoyed at every moment. You know what? Go back and look at when I go back, I look at my own writings. Every time I talk about the truth, I talk about 147 of the Constitution. I always write about it. And I'll tell you something. When the judge that morning started his opening statement and gone to what we call the preface of the Constitution, start to talk about it, I said to myself, this is it. This is it. Because the judge concentrated on the Constitution. It started and the end. I want to tell you something. Workers got to start to get out. Like this weekend, let me just take this up to tell you, this weekend. You see this struggle here? It's women struggle. You talk about it. These were women who talk about slippers on the ground. It was the women who led the way. Those women started out there. You know what we're going to be doing this weekend? This weekend, we get Labor Week, Fixed-Law Week, launch on Sunday. We have a platform at the Parliament building at the foot of the Fixed-Law there, statue. It will be 4 women on that platform. Led by the president of the Postal and Telecommunication, who will chair the proceedings, followed by and concluded by the vice president of the TUC, Ms. Malaya McCalmont from Boris. The women thing, let me tell you this. Labor Day, there will be 40 women leading this procession. It has to be a rebirth for this movement. And women got to come back and play the role that they played in the past. Right?
And we have one of those women here tonight who has been, in many regards, the face of this recent movement on the part of the teachers. And of course, that comes with the joy of knowing that you are leading people who look to you for leadership. But it also comes with having to take some blows from the other side. But as Coretta would say, she has broad shoulders because she's a Bobitian. And Bobitians have broad shoulders. Coretta, I want you to address the linkage between...
I hope you say that Buxton come from Bobis. I know you know.
No. I just lose the Buxtonian's foot. I just lose the foot when it near emancipation, because me go away about bees. But they understand. They understand. My mother come from New Amsterdam.
Wow.
Originally from down Country Creek. So I'm part Bobitian. Anyhow, Coretta, the linkage between wages, the wages that you all are fighting for, and cost of living. And then when you're done with that, everybody asking, so what the teachers gonna do now after the ruling? Bearing in mind that your general counsel tell you to do three things: seek conciliation, arbitration, go to court, and if they don't want conciliation, arbitration, go back to strike and don't come off until you resolve. So just reminding you what your general counsel tell you to do, just in case you forget, right? Over to you.
Oh, well, David, the fact that Lincoln has just indicated that the women have been the pillars of the trade union movement. The women have been leading the way. And once again, the women are being given the opportunity to take the lead. Over the years, we've recognized that there has been a real struggle with your wages and the cost of living. And I'm sure you would have seen those cartoonists, they're putting out those cartoons. Everybody else growing except that of wages and salary. We have been suggesting to the government over the years that there should be a ceiling with regard to cost of living in terms of price control. But you know what? They've not been budging because they get rich off of that. And they don't care who struggles at the end of it all. In addition to that, we have taken an oversight, or we take it for granted, that farmers don't have to labor. But like Lincoln just outlined, to fork the beds up, you must have a technique. And you must have more than one or two persons there, depending on the size of farming that you're doing. To put the seeds out there, to put the sheds over them, to water them, all of that is labor. And it requires the measures to be put in place to give justice or satisfaction, or people must have reward for what they do in the farm. It's like us. We can't do what the farmers are doing there, and the farmers can't do what we are doing. And so we must treat them equally. And in that instance, it is where we ask the government to put price control on fertilizers and all of these things that farmers have got to use. We've asked them to subsidize the farmers, especially when you have heavy rain, or now during this period where we're having lots of sun. What measures are you putting in place to cushion the expenses that the farmers have to expend, or the expenses that the farmers have to bear? Because when you put out 5 plots of pepper, and you can only reap from 3 beds or 3 plots, what would suffice for the loss of 2? Not forgetting that you would have invested monies there to put fertilizer, to get mold, to do this, all the other things that are required. And so it is the government's position, or the government's obligation, to ensure that farmers can do what they have to do on their farmland, and at the end of the day, still feel satisfied. And when they are satisfied, the consumers are going to be satisfied, because there will be a balance of prices when you have to make the purchase for your fertilizer and when you have to sell. And so when we go to the market, we would have value for money spent. But like I said earlier, there is only one Guyana for the elite because Barajab doesn't have to face the market. Irfan Ali doesn't have to face the market. All they do is walk through there and pose for picture up, to give the impression as if they care and they're concerned about the citizens of Guyana. But they're not. They don't care about the citizens. And so because of the absence of those measures, the citizens of Guyana who have to face the marketplaces will continue to feel the heavy squeeze of high cost of living, where your salaries are not able to match anything. You would recall maybe 5, 6 years ago, you go to the market with $5,000 and what you're able to go home with. And if you go to the market now with $5,000, it can't even pull a black plastic bag. And so you're seeing there what is happening with dollars spent and what you get for it. And we will continue as a labor movement to push not only for those who sit in offices and teach in classrooms, but for the farmers who are out there. We will continue to push for them. Additionally, I want to say that during this entire period, which was very trying for our teachers, because there were two major issues that were playing in our mind. One, the cutting of salaries, and that is because we know how vindictive the PPP government is. We knew when we struck in 2018, and then we had a ceasefire. The government said to us then, there will be no loss of pay, no victimization in whatever way. But we understand the PPP and how heartless they are. And we know that they would have gone after the teachers' wages because in their mind, they want to punish teachers because teachers struck against them. And it was not only the teachers striking against them, but it was Coretta McDonald. And so they wanted to create this wedge between the teachers of Guyana and Coretta McDonald. And it's easy for us to see the wickedness in the PPP. In 2018, Coretta McDonald was a champion. She was standing up for the rights of workers. She was doing what was right. But then in 2024, Coretta could have been labeled a prostitute. Let me put it that way. Because she was doing this now, not for the teachers of Guyana, but she was doing this for her party as far as they were concerned. But I'm happy that the judge in his ruling was able to vindicate the General Secretary of the GCU and to say that when those letters were written and signed by the General Secretary of the Guyana Teachers Union, she was not doing them because of politics. She was doing that in her capacity as General Secretary. And she was doing that based on the mandate that was given to her by the General Council of the Guyana Teachers Union. So I don't think it would be easy to erase for the PPP to accept that. And that is why they're going to appeal the case. But our teachers have been made to clearly understand, and Guyanese at large have been made to understand that this battle was a battle of survival, and it had nothing to do with politics, and it had nothing to do with Coretta McDonald, but it was about fighting for the rights of workers, and in particular, teachers in this instance. And so again, I want to congratulate the teachers of Guyana for the stand that they took amidst all the talk and all the bambasing that we got from Barra Javier on the Thursday press conferences. When it was not politics, it was racist, it was the union's books not in order, it was something else, and the goalposts kept shifting every time he spoke at his press conference, and the teachers threw that in a corner, he jumped to something else. But it was clear that, and it will continue to be clear to us, that the PPP are anti-working class. And in order for us to fight the PPP, we have to unite. As a trade union movement, we have to stand tall.
Stand
You
tall.
know, I remember in between 2015 to 2020, Lincoln and I, we were there fighting for our colleagues who form part of FITUG. And there were times when I remember when Lincoln and I got into heated arguments because I was saying to him, you see what we are doing for these folks over this side? Of course, I'm sure the viewers know that FITUG is another umbrella body, yes, an umbrella trade union body. And of course, we know they are closely linked to the PPP. GAU and NASI and the Guyana Labor Union and so on, they are part of that organization. And we were fighting battles to ensure that at every step of the way, if there was a trade union activity, that they were part of it. When they had issues, I remember when the sugar workers took to the streets, Lincoln Lois was out there with them during that period. I stood out there with them during that period. But you know what? In 2024, we did not see those trade union leaders standing with the teachers. And so it is safe to us that there is a line that is drawn between workers when a certain government is in place. Let me give you another example. I remember we were having the ILO conference, and Lincoln and I stood in front of Minister Scott, and we said to him, yes, members from the Guyana Trade Union Congress will form part of that delegation to go to the conference. But we will not attend that Congress if our counterparts from FITUG are not part of the delegation. But we would have seen before and now our counterparts from the FITUG arm, they're going to every conference, and the Guyana Trade Union Congress and its affiliates are not part of that delegation. We have seen them sit there and be members, installed as members of the Trade Union Recognition Board, and not a member from the Guyana Trade Union Congress is seated around that table. And so this is saying to us that some of our trade union leaders are about self. They're not about this movement. And unless we can clearly understand our roles as trade union leaders, there will always be that divide between workers, and workers are going to be treated differently. I want to encourage my brothers and my sisters who claim to be trade union leaders to remember that our motto is to ensure that workers all across this country, regardless of your race, color, creed, religion, or political affiliation, that they must be treated equally. So even if I'm a PPP supporter, I must stand up and shout when wrong things are being done against workers against this country. When they do what is right, you applaud them. And you don't give them big rounds of applause because it's their obligation to do for the workers of this country. But when they do the right thing and they go in accordance with the conventions that they have signed on to, you applaud them. But we must stand up when things are wrong, regardless of who is sitting in government. We must say it is wrong.
We must say it is wrong. Coretta, what next for the GTU? What is your next move?
Well, you know that we were waiting for the conclusion of this court issue. Yeah. Now that this has been concluded, we are going to again, like workers, like professionals, approach the Ministry of Education, reminding them that this court issue is now settled and we are ready to commence negotiations based on the proposal that we would have submitted.
Are
And we
you,
wait to hear from them. After that, we will move to the next step.
are you right in the Ministry of the Labor, the Minister of Labor, because the court was very pointed in the dereliction of duty on the part of the chief labor officer?
Well, you know what we would have done before when we wrote the Ministry of Education, and the judge highlighted that we copied to every single person whom those letters were supposed to go to. So when we write to the Ministry of Education, we will copy to the Chief Labor Officer, and we will also attention the Honorable Minister of Labor, and we
And,
will send to our affiliate our other affiliate members. After that,
yes.
we will move to the next step. Depending on the response we get from there, we will move to another step.
And the third plank of your directive from the General Counsel was to go to the court. Lincoln raised that question early tonight, and it's about engaging the court on the government's action. Have you contemplated that yet, or that's something that you will have to sit down with the lawyers and talk more about?
Well, it's one of the things that we have to sit with our attorneys to speak about. We have Mr. Darren Wade, and we have Senior Counsel Roysdale Forde, along with the President and General Secretary of the Gather Trade Union Congress, who we are going to sit with, and we will chart the next way forward. But I can say to you without any fear of contradiction that if the government is not prepared to sit with us, teachers are ready to hit the streets again.
You heard it here from the General Secretary of the Guyana Teachers Union, and we've been talking about the teachers, we've been talking about the attorneys, we've been talking about the court, but we also have to give kudos to the executives of the GTU. They have been on the fire, and it always happens when your workers are militant and they're ready to roll, they test their leadership. And I can tell you, and we know that we have been seeing Coretta, we've been seeing the president of the union, but there are other executives who have been putting in a lot of work. One of them from my village, Buxton, Mr. Lewis,
Nicholson.
Mr. Nicholson, Mr.
As a
Lewis
matter of fact,
from
David,
Buxton.
David, if you allow me, I want to publicly thank Mr. Cambridge, our second vice president, who signed his name onto that whole document. He stood there and he testified, and in the judge's pronouncement, he gave kudos to our second vice president, and he said that he was credible. He stuck to his story all the time, unlike the chief education officer. And this is what makes us trade unionists. When we can stand there, knowing what we stand for, and regardless of what some of the attorneys would say to us, and they're raising their voice at us, it will not cause us to shiver. We stick to our story because that's the truth and nothing else but the truth. So I want to commend him. I want to commend every other officer of the Gather Teachers Union, because we were one group and we led our teachers all across this country. You notice that I was here, I was there, I was fighting everywhere. All of our officers played their part. More importantly, I want to thank especially our teachers on the Essequibo Coast and our teachers from region number 10. Whenever you say F, they are ready. And our teachers on the Essequibo Coast, they defied all odds. And they stood out there, even when they were locked out from sitting under the benab. They found other places to go. Even when the police harassed them on the road, they found other places to go and they stood their ground. And so I want to commend them for those efforts and for standing there in light of knowing that they could have been victimized by the wicked PPP government. And don't let me say that they weren't threatened. Lots and lots of threats were meted out to our Indo-Guyanese teachers. And, while some of them, were scared, many of them said, no, I cannot take a party card to the supermarket. I cannot take a party card to the gas station. I cannot take a party card to the private hospital. This struggle is about survival. And so together, there as GPU, and you know the rest of it.
I know the rest of it. Counselor, we are running down on time, so I know a lawyer always has a comeback, something in his pocket that he wants to take out. Now is your time in your closing remarks to comment on anything that I did not ask you pointedly.
I'll be very brief, which is not usual for lawyers. But Dr. Hines, I just want to say again that this is a momentous and massive victory for teachers and for labor. I've received calls from lawyers, particularly throughout the Commonwealth and in the Caribbean, asking me to supply them with this judgment. It radically changes their understanding as to how this thing's supposed to work. In terms of our domestic situation, our national situation, I believe that this case plays a role in pushing not only labor forward, but bridging the gap, the expectation and poverty gap that currently exists in this country. We have millions and billions and trillions of dollars which are passed as a national budget, and the ordinary workers receive next to nothing. I love that sentence in our national anthem about other people's successive generations and other persons seeing the glory of what their foreparents did not see. This is our time. These are circumstances which would have come together to allow us here to be able to access these millions and billions of dollars. Because when we really look to see what is happening, as Lincoln said, the African Guyanese people predominantly by public servants and other persons who are public servants, Indians, East Indians, Amerindian people, they are being paid by the government peanuts. This is one class of Guyanese, public servants, who are receiving nothing from the wealth of this nation. And if nothing else, I believe that this, and I hope and pray that this decision will be able to achieve. And this is one of the ways in which we show that law works, because Dr. Hines, over the last years, our people been saying we mustn't go to court, the court is a waste of time, we fed up a court and so on. This is one of the ways in which we can be able to change that narrative, to rely on the mechanisms. Because really and truly, in many instances, what the PPP wants is either that you stay home, give up, roll over, and don't complain, or you run amok on the street. So they could say, look at the natives, look at the natives. They can't function in a proper democracy. So I believe what the trade union movement, the teachers union would have done, Coretta and Mark, led by leading this team here and leading through the GTUC, is to reposition this country where labor is front and center. We must be able to now to access the funds which are available in the Natural Resource Fund, in the budget. We must see a transfer from these funds into the pockets of people. Because, Dr. Hines, these millions and trillions of dollars that are passed in the national budget, at least 666 million of them are for capital works. Public servants are not capable of accessing those projects. They don't bid on any contract. So they are shut out from accessing a chain of resources in their lives. So I believe this is what ultimately this case is about. It's about ensuring that we have the right to strike. It's about using the right to strike, and ultimately changing and ending this barrier that exists between the wealth of the country and the poverty that that the PPP wants you to continue to live under. I believe that this is a significant occasion. I can't say too much. This is significant. This is big. This is bigly. This is this is progress. This is defending people, and I am so happy that personally that I could have played a role in it. You know, I was so consumed in this case, Dr. Hanks, that I told my friend, we're friends from little boys. We all went to school all the way through. So one day he came to my office and he saw me laboring and working over on these things. And he asked me what this case is about. We're working on now. And I told him, and I said, you know, this case means so much to me that if I win this case and I don't want to practice another day in my life, I would believe that I would have done my duty to my country. So he asked me if I still practicing. I said, yes, I still have more to do. You know what? You're defending people, but this is significant. This is a magical day for labor. Thank you very much and good night.
Thank you, Brother Lincoln. Your closing thoughts?
I want to say something. I'm going to be brief. I'm not like Roysdale. I am not a priest, neither am I a politician. So I will be brief. Let me just tell you this. I have a message for Nandalal, Jack Bio and Ali. They said they're going to appeal the case. I want to tell them this, that we will walk with them. We will go to bed with them. We will wake up the next morning and we will walk again to the appeal court, to the CCJ that they believe they own. They believe they own the CCJ. And when we walk in there, we will make life miserable for them on the road. This year, this country is not their property. The court has pronounced they must respect the court's decision. Don't run around the place like headless chicken and believe that we can do things to subjugate the workers of this country. It has to come to an end. Good night, comrades. May your dreams come true. We all shall struggle as we crusade along across this country. Better got to come now.
Coretta? Your audio.
Yeah. David, again, I really am quite happy and excited. I have recognized that there is no mountain that workers cannot climb in this country and succeed. All we've got to do is stick to the principles of labor and stick to the law if we have to go there. And we are going to champion our cause. But I want to close off by extending happy birthday to our senior counsel, 50 not out. This has been a bigly win for him. Double celebration. Senior counsel, may God continue to bless you and continue to give you the patience, the wisdom, and the tolerance you need to stand with us, the workers of this country, so that we can show not only Guyanese here, but we can show the world that the law is still standing. And with you by our side, we can move mountains. Happy birthday to you. And to our people all across this nation, and to those who are watching us in the diaspora, just understand that the labor movement in Guyana is here to stay. Whether some join us or they don't join us, we, the ones who are guided by the sacrifices that were made by persons such as Hubert Nathaniel Critchlow, their sacrifices, the sacrifices of Polidor, the sacrifices of so many women, Will Crawford and a whole lot of them, will continue to resonate with us. And we will continue to stand on their shoulders because they would have started this work for us. Kudos to the Guyana Trade Union Congress and its affiliates, and long live the workers of this country.
Long live the workers of this country. We continue to struggle. We will not still our voices. This struggle must continue because it is a struggle like no other since we walked through the gates of the plantation. As Martin Carter himself says, no, I will not still my voice. I have too much to claim. If you see me looking at your hands or listening when you speak or marching your ranks, know that I look for fire. I've learned from books, dear friend, of men who lived in a room hungering without any light, of men who could not die because death was far too poor, of men who did not sleep to dream, but dream to change the world. Dream to change the world. My sister, my brothers, always a pleasure. You all have left me asking God for one more year than he intended to give me. He said 99. And tonight I'm going to ask him for 100 because of you. Happy birthday, Roysdale, Lincoln. Always a pleasure. And as you and Coretta and the other trade unionists prepare for May Day, please feel free to come back on Politics 101. As you and I and others in 1984, under the leadership of what the Public Service Union man, George Daniels, we said, May Day, a workers' day, not Massa Day. You remember that chant? May Day, a workers' day, not Massa Day. We have to invoke that chant on this May Day, because these masses think that they have a license bigger than the license that the other masses have. But we will not still our voice. Good night. Good night.
Good night.
Thank you all so much. Thank you all so much. And to you, our audience, we want to say thanks to you for staying the full 2 hours. You all a marathon. Tonight was not sprinting. Tonight was long distance running. And the hundreds of you who stayed with us showed that you all are done with this struggle. You all are done with this struggle. Tomorrow night, I'll be back ready to roll again.